Our next bill is 5445 by Representative Carson. It's relating to the State Affairs and Government, the 2021 Act on Climate. I must explain, due to the overwhelming response, we are processing testimony to post on the web. Some of it will not be available till next week. The overwhelming response has been positive for this bill. There are only 2 people on the verbal list that are against the bill. So Representative Carson gets all the time she needs to speak, and Lynette Furry-Menard will have the same amount of time. After that, because we have 3 pages to go through, we're going to limit you to 2 minutes, and try to be brief. Don't read to us, and any of the written testimony can be found on the General Assembly homepage, bottom right-hand corner. You see a box, it says documents. You can read all the testimony there. Thank you. Representative Carson, introduce your bill.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. For the listening witnesses at home, my name is State Representative Carson, and I represent the great city of Newport. And it's really a great pleasure today to bring this bill to be discussed this evening. I have a few things I want to say about this. In October of 2020, there was a survey that was done of 20,000 Americans across all 50 states. And Alaska was the #1 state that all the states identified COVID as their top priority. Alaska was one of the states that recognized that climate change was #2 on their priority list. And only one other state out of the 50 had climate change as #2, and that was Rhode Island. 86% of the Rhode Islanders that responded to that survey said they were concerned about it or greatly concerned about it. And the survey was completed by a set of organizations that included Harvard, Northeastern, Northwestern, Rutgers, and Kennedy School of Government. So it's very clear to me that our constituents really want us to do something on climate. So we hear that Rhode Island is such a small state. Why should we care? There's countries out there that are putting so much more carbon into the atmosphere. There's China, there's Mexico, there's India. Well, we should care because we have to really we have to care because we have to do our share. We have to do our share. We have a responsibility to curb carbon and participate in a worldwide movement to reduce carbon. So then we hear that all the states out west are producing carbon, in the Midwest, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and what are other states doing? Well, other states actually are doing a lot of things, and some of the other speakers will address that. Colorado, one of its main focuses this year is climate and the managing gas emissions. Massachusetts and Connecticut have already passed similar bills to this. California and Florida are looking at similar types of bills. This is actually happening. It's not being made up. Around the world and around the country, governmental organizations are addressing climate. So why should Rhode Island care about climate? For those of you that read the Projo, and I'm sure it's most of the people in this room, there was an article just this week about the cost of flood insurance. It was also on Go Local Prov this week. And it says that if federal flood insurance premiums are recalculated to reflect actual risks, they could be 2.5 times what they are now for thousands of vulnerable homes in Rhode Island, according to a study released Monday. The insurance costs reflect total flood losses for those homes in the 100-year floodplain, estimated at $13 billion today, to be $18 million by 2050. And the thing that concerns me is not only the cost that our constituents will be paying for flood insurance, but what I've argued for many years is that we're going to see a reduction in the value of coastal homes if they start to really become flooded. And if there's a reduction in the value of coastal homes, our municipalities are not going to have the tax base that they have today. And I think that we really have to think about that long and hard, because that could happen in our lifetimes. So what's the impact of climate on Rhode Island? The thing that I'm most concerned about, based on where I live, is sea rise. I've seen it many times on the streets of Newport. I shared with the members of this committee a House Study Commission report that I produced when I chaired the House Study Commission on the economic impact of sea rise and climate change 6 years ago. And there were several things in that report, if anyone got to read it. When that study commission looked at 3 different case studies. We looked at the Providence Port, and that's on page 27 of that report if you go to read it. And almost all of our energy comes through the Providence Port: airplane fluid, airplane fuel, home heating oil, impact of flooding on Providence Port. We'll have raw sewage discharge. There'll be damage to roads right there. We all know where the port is along the south side of Providence. Those are the kinds of things that they're getting ready for at the Providence Port. And when we look at my community, when we looked at my community in that study commission, we learned that there are 500 businesses in the flood zone in Newport. We learned, and they're valued at $3.8 billion, by the way. And we also learned that about 55% of all of the hotel rooms in Newport are in the flood zone. So why should we care about that? We should care about that because if Newport's out of business for a year the way Westerly was after they were hit by the hurricane 8 years ago, we're going to lose hotel tax money, we're going to lose meal tax money, we're going to lose gas tax money, we're going to lose sales tax money. It's going to be a real problem. It's going to be an economic problem. There was another article in the Pro-Joe that's dated August 14, 2019, where they cited that Rhode Island has been experiencing the most warming of all the lower 48 states. When all the states are studied to determine exactly how much warmer it's getting in those states, we're number 1. We've experienced the most warming. That concerns me. So, what will opponents say about this bill? Well, they're going to look at the bill and they're going to say, what's the plan? What's the plan for this bill? How are we going to do this? Well, this bill is about a plan. That's what this bill is all about. This bill is about cracking down and designing a real emissions management plan for the state of Rhode Island. There is no plan right now. I'll make that really clear because I think the critics are going to be upset that there's no plan. And I admit that right out of the box. There's no plan. This bill, which I'll go over in detail at the end, is going to require us to create a plan. Now, why is a plan important? Last month, in a meeting on Aquidneck Island with about 100 of my constituents and Representative Cortran's constituents, we met with Senator Whitehouse on climate. And one of the questions that I asked him was, how can Rhode Island be prepared for new opportunities from the federal government to combat climate change? How can we get ready? What can our municipalities do to get ready? And the answer he gave us, and you can go watch the video, he said you need a plan. He said for the states that have actual plans to reduce emissions and really build sustainable economies, those are the states that are going to get the federal resources. And those federal resources are going to begin to become really freed up. He was hopeful in this Biden administration there would be money spent on this. We have to be ready. I don't want to see Rhode Island be last in the region again. I don't want to see Massachusetts and Connecticut get all the money to fortify their economy, to fortify their homes, their businesses, and we're left out. So we need a plan. You're going to hear that this is going to be an economic hardship for Rhode Island. Okay. There's nothing in this bill that costs money, raises taxes, doesn't do anything. It creates a plan. We're going to incentivize businesses. We're going to work with municipalities. We're going to look at private and public incentives. The plan is going to be an inclusive experience to create a plan for the state of Rhode Island. All those folks are being included. There's some criticism that who's going to do this plan? Well, if you read the bill closely, it does itemize those different groups of people that will be involved. Again, there's no fees in this bill, and it will have no cost. So, there's also the opponents will say, people are going to have to buy new cars. People are going to have to replace their burners. It's going to cost the average Rhode Islanders a lot of money because we, the folks that are promoting this kind of an idea, we don't want them to drive their cars anymore. Well, that's ridiculous. I mean, that's really ridiculous. Of course we want them to drive those cars. This bill looks out almost 30 years. We're not talking about changing everything tomorrow. We're talking about making these changes over a 30-year plan. And what's going to happen over this 30 years? Well, a lot of things are going to happen over this 30 years. For example, Ford and GM are going to stop making gas cars. They have made, you can go Google that yourself. They have pledged that Ford has allotted $29 billion to put into their manufacturing capacity so that they can move completely to electric cars. They expect that to happen by the year 2035. That will have a huge impact. Consumers won't even be able to buy cars that have carbon emissions anymore. So there are things in the works that maybe some of these the opponents to this bill are not seeing. And that is that there are changes being made in the marketplace that are going to begin to move us in this direction without really making it economically difficult for the average Rhode Islander to be part of this transition. New cars, new buildings will be built. They'll be green. There'll be retrofits to buildings, as you or I need to replace our burner, we need to replace our hot water heater. There'll be a lot more opportunity to make choices that do not emit emissions. That's what's going to be in the marketplace. Those are absolutely going to be the options. And I think it's important to say that when Ford and GM, two of the largest giant manufacturing firms in this country, have made commitments to transfer to all-electric cars, that's a significant statement about where corporate America is going. I think that we should pay attention to that. And I think that it's a sort of a statement about the fact that the people are moving in this direction. There's another criticism that Rhode Island doesn't create enough emissions. Like, our emissions are not that bad. What's the problem? Yeah, our emissions are not the same as India. There's no doubt about that. But we still have a responsibility to our country and the world to participate in these types of programs. But let's talk about who supports the bill, okay? Interestingly enough, the National Chamber of Commerce doesn't necessarily support this bill, but according to Bloomberg, dated January 21st, the Chamber of Commerce on Tuesday in January embraced tougher action to combat climate change through carbon taxes, emission caps, and other market-based policies. Emission caps, that's what this plan is about. The National Chamber of Commerce made a statement to this effect. Again, another giant in this country making a statement that they want us to move in this direction. I get so frustrated when the debate becomes the environmental community versus the business community. That's a debate that we've seen since the 1970s when we first passed the Clean Water Act. That's not what this debate is about. This debate is really about climate and our children, to what Chairman Bennett made reference to before. It's about climate and our own futures. It's about climate and our economies. That's what it's about. And I challenge our opponents to jump on board and come with us. There are many other organizations here in Rhode Island that support this bill, and that includes the AFL-CIO, the Audubon, Clean Water Action, Climate Action, Jewish Alliance of Greater Rhode Island, the NEA, the National Wildlife Federation, and that list, including the Medical Society. So that list goes on and on. So what's in this bill? Thanks to the hard work of this legislature in 2014, under the leadership of Representative Handy at that time, Rhode Island passed the Resilient Rhode Island Act of 2014. And that was the state's first ever comprehensive climate bill, and it called for reductions of carbon emissions by 45% in 2035 and 80% by 2050 below 1990 levels. But it only required limited impact for the EC4, the state's council that is working on climate, to create one emissions plan. This bill does four things. Number one, it creates concrete plans to meet the emission reduction targets will be issued by the EC4 every 5 years. Every 5 years, the plan will be updated. Number two, the plans will have equitable transition for environmental justice populations and a process for environmental justice communities to provide input on the plan. Number three, there will be accountability and enforcement, and the plan will be legally binding. There's been some criticism of the fact that the bill also has the opportunity for lawsuits if the plan is not followed, which I kind of think is a good idea. I mean, we have tons of plans on the shelf. DEM has done a wonderful job, the EC4 has done a wonderful job, but it's really time to put like our pedal to the metal and implement these plans. And I think that the citizens of Rhode Island want to know that this plan is going to be implemented. And if they're not, there are legal consequences. And then I think the last thing, and what I'm going to close with, is that this bill updates our climate targets in accordance with the latest science regarding what is needed to avert a climate disaster. And so I'm closing with that because I wanted to say that I think we've learned a little bit about science in the past year. And I think that, when I went to school, I studied science, and it seemed to really make sense and be provable. And we just came out of this, or still in, this huge COVID experience. And there's been a lot of debate as to whether or not we should have believed the science a year ago. And with 500,000 Americans dead, it seems pretty clear to me we should have believed the science a year ago. So this bill will rely on science. And I think that that's a really important point of the bill and really brings us back to where we need to be as a state and as a nation, and really relying on data to make very informed decisions. So with that, I know there's many people out there that want to testify on this. I thank you for the opportunity to speak on this bill, and I really look forward to passing it.
Thank you, Representative Carson. Very good testimony, very interesting bill, something we need to do. Our first witness, please.
Mr. Chairman,
I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
Are you accepting questions? from the
Yeah,
sponsor?
I'm sorry, I skipped right over that. Representative Knight has a question for Representative Carson.
If I may, through the chair, Representative Carson, you alluded to the, some people had concerns about the enforceability, the ability of any person to bring a lawsuit to enforce the law. And I just want to make clear, and maybe you can help me out, those lawsuits, if they came,
so the chair?
would only be
Who's up?
to require action of some agency. There's no money damages available. Is that correct?
I don't think so. I'm going to yield to later witnesses to actually answer that question. And the only reason there would be a lawsuit would be because the plan was not actually being implemented. That's the reason.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the bill provides for a lawsuit for an injunction or a fancy thing called a writ of mandamus, or some sort of action. This is not an avenue for some plaintiff to get a windfall in money from the state.
I don't think so.
That's exactly right. So it's important to note that the legal action to enforce it is somewhat constrained to simply force the government to do its job.
Correct, that what we decided we want them to do. That's
And not
exactly right.
extract money and provide some plaintiff with some windfall. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, well, not only that, it concerns us often that we institute some plans and we move in a direction where we want to begin addressing an issue of importance to the state. And then, under normal circumstances, we have a new administration comes in and they decide that that's not really important to them anymore. And that's fine. That's what happens in the course of a transition of the government. I understand that. But this bill will be on the books, enforceable, going forward for the next 30 years.
Representative McEntee.
Yes, great bill, Representative Carson. I wanted to ask, on page 2, it outlines our goals for how we're going to, the greenhouse gas emission reductions. And I'm wondering, have we met that 10% below 1990 levels by 2020? Do we know the answer to
I don't know the
anything?
answer to that. I bet one of our future speakers does. Let's leave it to them.
And as well, I'd like to know where we stand right now with the 45% below 1990 levels, which was supposed to be 2035, but you're reducing it to 2030. So I'm just wondering how we're doing, and are we getting any? Because it looks like the bill that originally passed did ask for some kind of plan, right? That somebody's supposed to be keeping track of this, right?
Yeah, I think the EC4 is doing that. That's the Executive Environmental Council, and under the leadership of DEM Director Janet Coit, and they do meet regularly, and they have two or three advisory councils that help them to work on their, and they have been working on a wide variety of projects. I follow their work. So they will know. And folks that attend those meetings, I know they're speaking, they'll know the answer to that question also. And they have set some very good plans out there. I'm not at all critical of the work that
Right.
they've done. except that we need something real and enforceable.
Yes, no, thank you.
Thank you. Representative Fenton Fong.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Rep. Carson, for your leadership on this. I think there's a lot of great bipartisan support for clean air, water and clean air initiatives included in this bill. I have two areas of concern, question, just ways that this could be strengthened that I'd love just to kind of throw out there. If you don't know the answer all the way, I'm happy to listen to all the testimony. I'm sure it's coming forth. So on page 5, we get to 42/6.2/9, which talks about the statewide greenhouse gas emission reduction mandate. I was wondering if, and taking a look holistically here, knowing how fragile our economy is, I was wondering if we've talked to the crew down at Electric Boat and down at Quonset, where we have a lot of manufacturing and different types of corporate type of, let's just leave it as manufacturing for right now. Were they brought in on any of this to talk about and make them partners as far as reducing emissions and how this might impact them? One, just because I know they're such an economic driver in the state.
The answer is no, they were not part of the conversation as far as I know.
Okay. It would be great if we had their input, because I always like to try to make businesses partners in this instead of adversaries. So I think that would be...
Well, we have one big partner that I forgot to mention, and that's National Grid. They support the bill, which is kind of interesting.
Okay. All right. So, and then secondly, on page 4, line 26, we talk about creating a vibrant and resilient food system. And I can't agree with this anymore, considering especially what's happened over the past year. I guess my input on that would be, it's really, this comes up with another issue when we're talking about fishermen and our commercial fishermen in the state, which is such a big part of our economy, when we're looking at how the offshore wind farms are being sited. Okay, I think, unfortunately, some of the parts of that wind farm are right in the middle of the calamari field. And, we heard it from the commercial fishermen. Sometimes they weren't being listened to and involved in the process. I think when we're talking about kind of creating these resilient food systems, I want to make sure those businesses are brought into the equation as well. But otherwise, I appreciate your leadership on this.
Well, as far as the commercial fishermen go, I've spoken to, on an additional note, I've spoken to commercial fishermen in Newport, and they're seeing different fish. I mean, they really are seeing different fish. They're not catching the same fish that their fathers caught 20 and 30 years ago. The fish is moving north. That's because of the warming of the waters. I mean, so they're actually very interesting to talk to about this issue, because they can tell you firsthand what their experiences have been. They're generally allies in trying to make sure their business stays alive. So,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And trying to, again, make them partners. I just want to make sure everybody's at the table and that we're getting a big, broad perspective here and that we're listening to our small businesses. So thank you.
Okay, we have a witness on the phone, Amy Moses. Sorry about my error. I skipped over asking the committee questions, made you wait on the phone. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm ready to go.
Go ahead, it's all yours.
Thanks, Chairman and members of the committee, for the opportunity to testify in support of this critically important legislation. My name is Amy Moses. I am Vice President and Rhode Island Director at Conservation Law Foundation. This bill, Act on Climate, is our #1 top priority. We're grateful to Rep. Carson for her leadership, and I want to thank Majority Leader Blazejewski and several members of this committee for co-sponsoring the bill, Rep. Cortland, Rep. Speakman, Rep. Knight, and Rep. Hagan-McEntee. Climate change is here, and it's only going to get worse. Rhode Island has not passed comprehensive climate legislation since 2014. That was the Resilient Rhode Island Act. And now is the time to update that act and get to work reducing our climate-damaging emissions. The climate crisis is an all-hands-on-deck emergency. We have to tackle it at all levels of government and in all 3 branches of our government. Thankfully, the new president is re-engaging internationally. Just last week, the United States re-entered the Paris Accord. At the national level, the president's making climate and equity a top priority of his administration. And here in Rhode Island, you, the members of the House Environment Committee, have the opportunity to make sure that the Ocean State does its part by passing this bill. And you will be in good company supporting this bill. Today, you'll hear and get written testimony from environmental groups, labor unions, public health advocates, and many more. The Act on Climate bill is the foundation for other climate bills you may hear later this session. I want to emphasize that. This bill puts in place a solid foundation for emissions reductions throughout our economy. Other bills later will focus on different pathways, for example, to reduce emissions. Those bills build upon this one, but we've got to have a strong foundation in place to make everything work together. As Rep. Carson mentioned, we currently have the EC4 Coordinating Council. Under existing law, it just has to come up with one emissions reduction plan, and we've got some voluntary goals for 2035 and 2050. That's the current state of affairs. Focusing on the Act on Climate bill that's before you, I want to highlight 4 key features. First of all, science. This bill is based on science. Our current goals are outdated and they are insufficient. So this bill updates the goals so we reach net zero emissions by 2050. This is consistent with the Paris Accord and our neighbor, Massachusetts. Second, this bill provides transparency into how the state is tackling our emissions reductions. It does this in several ways, and I'll just name a couple. First of all, it has emissions reductions targets for 2030 and 2040, as well as 2050. This is going to get us on track sooner. It also requires an update to the emissions reductions plan by the end of 2025, and then every 5 years. Right now, we just have one plan to get all the way to 2050. So under the bill, we're going to update the plan every 5 years, and the plan, public comment is required for the plan, and we've got targets every 10 years. So that's science and transparency. Then we've got equity. There's equity in this bill by addressing environmental justice communities and providing for a just transition. Communities are impacted differently by the climate crisis, and those who do the least harm often bear the brunt of the worst impacts while having fewer resources to address these challenges. So the plans will include an equitable transition for environmental justice communities, and it will have a process to get comments from environmental justice communities as well. And it will identify support for workers in the transition, such as programs to recruit, train, and retain people into clean energy jobs. And fourth and finally, there is accountability that Rep. Knight mentioned earlier. It makes the state greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets legally binding and enforceable. And this is key because it makes addressing the climate crisis an endeavor of all 3 branches of our government. As Rep. Carson was saying, you, the legislature, pass the law, and then you turn it over to the executive branch to get to work implementing the law. Now, if the executive branch falls short, the judicial branch can step in and enforce the law, ordering the state to comply with it. So this bill takes the climate crisis seriously. It's got science, transparency, equity, and accountability. It provides a solid foundation from which we can work to reduce our climate-damaging emissions. Americans and Rhode Islanders want action on climate. Polls show Americans want their government to do more to address the climate crisis, and here in Rhode Island, a poll that was reported in the Boston Globe found that climate was the top issue for Rhode Islanders just after COVID.
In
So we've got action. In conclusion, Rhode Island hasn't taken action on climate in a long time. Now's the time to do it, and this is the bill you need for a solid foundation. I'd be happy to answer any of the earlier questions I heard or additional questions.
Thank you, Ms. Moses, for your testimony. We have a question from Representative Brand.
Thank you. My question is, and I'm fully in support of this, and I think having a plan would make me feel a lot better about what's happening on Aquidneck Island. As Rep. Carson knows, we experienced a gas crisis some time ago, and now we're evaluating what's the best way forward to address that, to make sure that doesn't happen again. And Amy, could you tell us if having this plan would, how that would intersect with oversight of the plans that National Grid are putting forward? And I'm so happy and thankful that National Grid is supportive of this. So could you talk about that? Am I off base thinking that there's an intersection someplace on these 2 different things?
Well, everything's connected when it comes to the environment. So the plans that will be passed by the EC4 under this bill are economy-wide, and they pertain to emissions throughout the economy. So it does include emissions, for example, from the electricity sector and the heating sector, both which, National Grid's involved with. National Grid has its own climate goals, quite frankly. So these bills, these plans that will be passed every 5 years will focus on the whole economy, including the heating sector, including the electricity sector, and there will be opportunities for public comment. So I'm sure they will be considering what National Grid is doing to reduce emissions on Aquidneck Island and elsewhere.
Thank you very much, and I just want to thank Rep. Carson for her leadership on this. This is a great bill, and I hope we get this over the goal line this year. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Moses? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony, Ms. Moses. You have a wonderful weekend. Back to Chairman Bennett.
Thanks.
Thank you, Amy. Next witness, please. Oh, next witness. Hi, Lynette, can you hear me?
Yes, Chairman, I can. How are you?
I'm doing well. The floor is yours. You can take as much time as you want because you're one of the few people that oppose the bill. So go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman, but I will try not to take too much time.
That's nice of you.
Excuse me. On behalf of the Northern Rhode Island Chamber of Commerce, I am here to oppose the passage of 5445 in its current form. I won't go into too much of the details in the bill, but let me get you to the concerns. First of all, many groups have been meeting to discuss various ways to meet the current goals that are in our state law, and many strides have been made. When I say many meetings, I mean EC4 meetings, there's a transportation sector committee, there's a heating sector committee, there's an environmental justice committee. I've been to almost every one of their meetings. I've attended them through Zoom. There's a lot of hard work going on. And Rhode Island has, as I said, reduced its energy use through conservation programs. And we've met the first goal of 10% below 1990 levels. The Energy Information Administration has said that Rhode Island consumes less energy on a per capita basis than any other state. They've also said Rhode Island's total emissions of carbon dioxide are the second lowest among all the states, at least in 2017 when the latest data was made available. And we should feel proud about those accomplishments. Businesses worked hard to get there. The environmental community worked hard to get there. We all did. The challenge comes in what this plan that is hopefully envisioned looks like. And that's where the business community gets really concerned. At a 2019 DEM heating sector meeting that I attended, the Brattle Group, which is a consultant hired by the state, commented that 80 by 50 means a near full decarbonization of residential and commercial heat. So what does that mean? That means that to reach 80% greenhouse gas reduction by 2050, and in this bill it's 2040, all homes and commercial buildings would have to switch to geothermal heating systems or electric heat pumps until some other technology comes to light. But at this point, right in time, at least what we were told in that heating sector meeting, the only thing really available to us is geothermal heating systems and electric heat systems. We asked at that meeting, what does that mean for commercial costs? And those figures weren't available. The consultant did tell us, however, that for a residential deep energy retrofit, it would cost between $50,000 and $100,000 or more. That's per house. So the house I'm sitting in, talking to you from, would take $50,000 to $100,000 to switch over.
That's not true.
Further, to reach 80%, Brattle Group stated that they believe vehicles, both personal and delivery, would have to become electric. So, I mean, one thing we always get concerned about is cost, and we need to figure out how that would come to be, how we would get there, if we can get there. But then the second question that comes up is, if we're switching everything over to electricity, how do we do that? According to EIA, right now in Rhode Island, 89% of our electricity is generated by natural gas. We use about 538 gigawatts on an annual basis. So that means currently 480 gigawatts of our state's electricity is generated using a fossil fuel. The Brattle Group said just to do the residential and commercial buildings to electric heat, we would need an additional 75 gigawatts of new electricity generation. If we all go to geothermal heat, which isn't really possible, but if we did, that would mean we would need an additional 44 gigawatts of new electricity generation. I hate to throw all these numbers out, but it's those kinds of facts that I think most people can understand, at least makes the business community go, we need a more detailed plan of how this would work and what it would look like. Rhode Island currently has the fourth highest electricity cost in the country, according to EIA. We've been trying to figure out what would happen to electricity prices as we try to shift over, just to get a full look at what the picture would look like. And we have not been able to do that yet. We're still trying. Rhode Island's current law allows this type of analysis to take place, and then comes back to you, the lawmakers, and says, here's what we think we have to do. If you think that's the right thing to do, pass it. Pass a law saying everyone has to switch to electric heat in their buildings. Everyone has to do electric vehicles. And if that's what you think is the right thing to do it. The problem with the way this bill is set up is that it sets the goals in place and then passes it off to the executive branch to put the plan in place. And then if they fail to meet it, if they fail to meet the targets, they can be sued. And I do agree, Rep. Knight, the only money I can see in that case, in one of those cases, is the attorney's fees. I think that's it. The rest is just a requirement to meet the target. But a requirement to meet the target is going to mean costs, which may be valid, but costs that have to be absorbed somehow. The Northern Rhode Island Chamber of Commerce is not opposed to trying to find ways to reduce emissions. That's not it at all. It's putting together a detailed plan that can be seen, understood from an environmental point of view, from an emissions point of view, from a cost point of view, from a transition point of view, from a feasibility point of view. That's what the Chamber of Commerce would like to see in writing. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I guess the only thing I'm missing is that I did want to make a note to everyone that the EC4 committee, Liz Catucci, who is the president and CEO of Northern Rhode Island Chamber of Commerce, was just recently put on that committee. Until her appointment, there was no business representation on that committee. So that's a step in the right direction, but we would like to see some more people involved, more business folks involved. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lynette. Any questions? Yes, Representative McLaughlin.
Yes, Ms. Menard, Lynette. Rep. McLaughlin, can you hear me?
Yep. Hi, Rep.
How you doing? Hope everything is well. And in reference to, you had mentioned electric cars. You know, currently, General Motors and Ford are coming out with electric cars. Chevy already has an electric car, okay? Battery life on that car expectancy is 6 years, period. The whole bottom of the car is just basically, you know, batteries. They haven't currently developed a battery, okay, sustainable for a long period of time. Whether that's changed, I don't know. Do you have any insight into that?
No, Rep, unfortunately I don't. It is a question, though, that is coming up over and over again, and I know that the convenience stores are going to be testifying later. I don't know if they're going to have info on that. But in addition to the cars, there's the infrastructure piece that has to be thought about too.
The average cost for a battery pack, okay, for a small vehicle, currently is $6,000. And the lifespan currently is 6 years. So, hopefully General Motors and Ford can develop a better battery. This not only in the United States, they've been working on this problem all around the world, okay, to come up with a long-lasting battery. So there's a lot of hoops. Everybody wants, a better, cleaner environment. But then you want to touch on battery disposal. They're the most hazardous things in the world. The electrolyte, the fumes, they'll kill you. So, anyways, thank you for your testimony, Lynette.
Thanks, Rob.
Representative Speakman.
Thank you, Chairman. You just made reference to a plan and the elements of a plan that you would like to see. And as I read Representative Carson's bill, there doesn't seem to be a lot of difference between what she anticipates and what you seem to be calling for. And I don't see, and maybe I'm missing it, Rep. Carson, I don't see any reference to heat pumps or actually to electric cars. I think the goal here is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to create a plan to do so. If there are other ways to do this, increasing mass transportation, for example, those would also move towards. So I don't see, and Rep. Carson, if I'm missing it, please let me know. I don't see any specific recommendations for kinds of heating systems or geothermal or anything like that. Rep. Carson, help me out.
I think that's part of the plan. I think it's a holistic look at all of our emissions. And, and again, I just put 2 heat pumps in my house. It didn't cost $20,000. I put 2 of them in with an air conditioning unit for part of the house. And as people replace these items in their houses, they can begin to put them in. Mm-hmm. And they have 30 years to do it. So it's not going to cost $20,000 tomorrow. New homes will be built with them. I really think that we have to take the long view here and just slowly transition to these kinds of systems.
All right, good. Thank you.
Chairman, if I could answer, I just want to really make it clear that the chamber is not advocating in favor of heat pumps requirements and electric vehicle requirements. What I was trying to point out is that in the meetings that I have participated in, it's the experts in the field that seem to tell us at this point that is the only way to reach the targets that are in this bill. That in order to reach those, these are the things we would have to do without question. So that's where we're getting the information from.
Well, and as Rep. Carson and others have said, the target encourages innovation, and we've had other testimony this evening about how folks, if they have to meet a goal, find all kinds of entrepreneurial ways to get to those goals. So I anticipate we'll see technological innovation that will help us move towards these goals. And again, the plan will, I'm sure, encourage such measures. So thank you.
Any other questions for Lynette? Seeing none, thank you, Lynette. Very informative.
Have a good night, Chairman.
You be safe. Can I have our next witness, please? Hello.
Hello.
Who am I speaking with?
This is Timmons Roberts.
Hi, how you
good
doing,
evening.
Timmons? I'm going to ask you to speak on the bill. Be brief. Your Honor, we're going to have you on for 2 minutes, so just try to be right to the point and get your point across. Thank you.
Will do. Thank you, Chair Bennett, and to the committee. I'm impressed with you all's fortitude in hanging in there tonight. This is a long road. This bill is so important. First of all, I'm speaking as an individual, but somebody who's worked for 30 years on climate change and solutions to climate change. and how we're going to get to them. I have 4 quick points. I'll summarize them. I won't read my testimony. The first is just how important climate change action is. I serve on the EC4's Science and Technology Advisory Board, the STAB. In 2016, we reviewed the science of what climate change means for Rhode Island, and it's dire. It's sea level rise, upland flooding, heat waves, rising temperatures, risk to property and infrastructure. It's going to cost us billions and billions if we don't act and if we're not leaders. Secondly, this bill is Act on Climate is actually quite brilliant. I think it really sets the markers that we have to reach, and then it does indeed leave it to the executive branch to work it out. And I want to talk a little bit about that in a second. When the bill that it's improving is the Resilient Rhode Island Act, as Representative Carson noted, from 2014. When we passed that, I testified at that time that it was based on old science. It was based on 1999 science. This idea that if we reduced emissions by 80% by 2050, that we would have addressed climate change. It's not enough. We know that the science has improved, and it's gotten much worse, much more dire. We need to reduce our emissions much faster than that. The targets in this bill are good ones. 50% by 2030, which I have just worked on a study, actually, and that's my third point. The Resilient Rhode Island Act required a study by the EC4 on how it would reach those targets of 80% by 2050. And that 2016 study showed that it could be done, but it did not try to go further. So I actually found some money at Brown University, thanks to President Paxson. I had a team of students and the same consultants I rehired from the same consulting firm, the Stockholm Environment Institute, and we ran it with deeper targets. And we put out a study called Deeper Decarbonization in the Ocean State that you can find on the Stockholm Environment Institute webpage, and I will send in as additional testimony. And it showed that it's feasible for us to reach deeper technology. And that was all based on existing technology, which gets to the discussion that's going on right now about these plans. The plans will be adjusted as the technology gets better. The batteries are improving on the same way that microchips are improving, and the same way that prices of solar and wind are dropping much faster than anticipated, and the technology will improve. When Kennedy said we're going to the moon, we had hardly put a satellite in orbit, let alone a man or a woman into orbit. In other words, we will figure out how we're going to get to 100% emissions reductions by 2050, and it will be to the benefit of our state, and it will be to the benefit of our children and our grandchildren, and really to ourselves, because this is no longer an issue in the future. It's an issue right now. So thank you. I'm happy to answer questions, or I've pledged before to help this committee address this important issue, and I will do so again. Thanks.
Any questions for Mr. Roberts? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Roberts. You have a safe night.
Thank you, and you.
Our next witness. Meg?
Yes.
Hi, this is Rep. Bennett again.
Hello, Chair.
We have your written testimony, so try to keep your comments brief and under 2 minutes. Thank you.
All right. I know you'll time it. Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. This is Meg Kerr with the Audubon Society of Rhode Island. I'm the Director of Policy there, and we enthusiastically support this bill. And we thank Rep. Carson for putting it forward. Audubon's 17,000 members are bird-loving people. And Audubon was originally formed by people who were gravely concerned about birds. Back in 1897, Audubon is the oldest environmental organization in the state. And our members are still very concerned about birds, and birds are disappearing from the skies at rates that shock ornithologists. We've lost about 3 billion birds, nearly 30% of the total. and a lot of the loss is due to climate change. So I wanted to say just a little bit about how is climate change right now in Rhode Island impacting birds and wildlife. Audubon wrote there's been articles in the paper about the salt marsh sparrow, which is a sparrow that nests in the salt marshes in coastal areas, and they put their nests right on the marsh itself. And what's happening now is at high tides, at high tides, the nests full of baby birds are flooding and the birds are dying. Internationally, salt marsh sparrows look to be probably the first first animal that will go extinct due to climate change. The bird's population has declined 75% since the 1990s. And it's estimated that they might not make it to the year 2050. So that's just one bird, but it's an example of how dire the situation is for wildlife. And if you think about inland impacts, birds and wildlife are also impacted there as well. We're having these more intense storms. Temperatures are warming. The warming temperatures are warming water. So in the fresh waters in the Wood River, which is one of the few places in the state where we have native brook trout, it's no longer cool enough for them to survive in many summers. So the fish that we enjoy are also being impacted.
Trying to finish up, Meg.
Yep, I just wanted to say that Audubon is 17,000 nature-loving members are concerned about these changes and demand action. And the bill that you have before you is consistent with what we have in our strategic plan, and we enthusiastically encourage you to pass it. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Meg? Seeing none, thank you, Meg.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. I don't want to come off as rude, but we've got 3 pages, or 2.5 now, of testimony left. And so just try to be brief and keep it 2 minutes or under, please. Thank you. Next witness, please. Randall, you there? Randall, you there?
Yes.
Randall, be brief and try to keep it 2 minutes or under. Turn down your device.
I'm doing that. I turned it off. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I am in support of this bill. I don't think it goes far enough. It says that there should be a 45% reduction below 1990 levels by 2030, which is what the international experts, the IPCC, call for. However, the mechanism in this bill will not achieve those cuts on schedule. It says in order for these mechanisms to be enforced, first of all, there has to be the threat of a court order to enforce it, and getting a court order takes a legal process which could take years. Even though this bill has a target of a 45% reduction by 2030, it's actually going to come with a delay of a year or more, first in getting the court order, then in getting the court order implemented, and then in achieving compliance with whatever specific plan is put into effect. Because there is going to be a delay of a couple years, it would be better for the bill to have a 45% reduction by 2028, so that we would achieve the IPCC target of 45% reduction by 2030. So the bill is not strict enough to actually achieve the IPCC reduction levels on schedule. So I do think it's important to make sure that something is done on this, and I like the idea of enforceability by a court order. However, I think that something like that is necessary to get state government to act on what so many Rhode Islanders want. The General Assembly can always step in if it doesn't like the particular details of a plan, but setting a hard deadline that's enforceable by a court order will ensure that some action is taken even if the General Assembly modifies it later. So that's a good aspect of this.
Try to finish up, Randall.
I will finish up. Last point. I know a number of people, corporate lobbyists, have written to you saying that they don't like this bill, and they are claiming that they want more input. I do think it's fine for corporate people and the business community to have input, just like the communities that are most harmed by this should have input. I think it's fine for everybody to be at the table, but the people who should be at the table on this are the people who are willing to commit to the IPCC targets. If a business says we will commit to the IPCC targets, we just want to be at the table and we'll support whatever comes out of the negotiation at the table. We just want input on how to achieve the targets. Then they should be at the table. Otherwise, not. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any questions for Randall? Thank you. Again, I got to reiterate that we have to be fair to all the people that want to testify tonight. And if we go over the 2 minutes, then we're going to be here till 10, 11 o'clock tonight. So please try to be brief, on point, and 2 minutes or under. Thank you. Our next witness. Hi, who am I speaking with?
Hi, this is Justin Boyan.
Hi, Justin. This is Representative Bennett from the Environment and Natural Resources Committee. You have the floor.
All right.
2 minutes.
Thank you so much.
2 minutes.
Thank you. 2 minutes. Okay. I'm Justin Boyan. I live in Providence. Other speakers have testified about the economic, health, and environmental benefits of this bill. I want to talk a little about its political benefits. Basically, this bill is shockingly popular with Rhode Islanders. So I'm speaking as the president of CARI, that's Climate Action Rhode Island. We're a young organization, 4 years old, but we have hundreds of active members in 5 regional teams all across the state. When this bill was introduced, we asked our members to take action by emailing their senator and rep in support of the bill. And over 772 people responded from all 38 Senate districts and all 75 House districts. And you should have in your testimony packet a list of the first 710 signers, which is what we had yesterday, and more are still coming in. Interestingly, when we put out a similar call last year for the Act on Climate 2020 bill, it drew only 154 responses. This year, nearly 800. So what we're seeing is popular demand for climate action is growing dramatically. The Atlantic wrote, "It's not a fluke, an error, or an outlier. In poll after poll, the results are clear. Climate change is one of the most important issues." Rep. Carson and Amy Moses mentioned the Harvard Northeastern poll, where it showed Rhode Island was one of only a couple states in the country where climate change was ranked as the top issue besides COVID. There's another poll I wanted to tell you about. Last October, Resources for the Future asked 27,000 Americans whether they believe the world's temperature will rise in the future if nothing is done to address it. Nationwide, 76% agreed. In Rhode Island, it was 86%, which was the highest of any state in the country. And also specifically asked whether the government should act to limit emissions from businesses and power plants. 92% of Rhode Islanders said yes to both, which was, again, the highest support of any state.
Finish up, Justin.
Yep, and the final thing was, last year we partnered with Clean Water Action and the Sierra Club to survey you, all candidates for the Rhode Island State Legislature. The first question on the survey was, do you commit to supporting the Act on Climate bill? And of the 68 who responded, including members of this committee of both parties, 67 responded yes. And the only one who answered no, I'll report that that person lost his primary race and only received 12% of the vote. So the bill has strong support, and we appreciate you working so hard to get it passed this year.
Thank you very much, Justin. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you, have a safe night.
Thank you.
Our next witness. What? Amanda, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, Amanda, you need to turn down your device, we're getting feedback.
And we appreciate you working so hard to get it done. Thank you very much.
How you doing?
How's that? Good, how are you?
That's better. Amanda, we're going to ask you to keep it 2 minutes or less, be brief
Will do.
and on point, okay? Thank you. It's all yours.
Thank you for the opportunity to share my support of this bill. My name is Amanda Babson, and I am an oceanographer and a practitioner of climate adaptation. But I'm speaking in my personal capacity to show my support of the 2021 Act on Climate bill. This bill supports a combination of adaptation and mitigation, mitigation being the reducing of greenhouse gases, both of which are needed in Rhode Island. Most importantly, it sets economy-wide enforceable greenhouse gas emission reduction targets because there's only so much climate change we can adapt to. It also provides support for environmental justice communities who bear the brunt of climate impacts. We need to take effective action to reduce the amount of climate change to keep within bounds of what we might be able to adapt to and protect all Rhode Island citizens. The nation and the world need to take significant action for ambitious greenhouse gas reduction targets. If Rhode Island joins other states that are getting out in front of the systemic changes that are needed to help us make the most of opportunities to transition our economy so that we can have both the clean energy workforce and communities prepared to protect our highest priority resources from the coming climate change impacts. I urge you to pass this bill out of committee and support it for a vote in the full House so that we can begin to bring climate action to Rhode Island. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Any questions for Amanda? Seeing none, thank you, Amanda, and thank you for being brief.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You be safe. Our next witness.
Curry.
Hi, who am I speaking with?
Hi, this is Curry Tolumsis again.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, fine, thanks. So,
The floor is yours.
okay, thank you again, Chairman Bennett and members of the committee. Once again, my name is Curry Tolumsis, and I'm a resident of North Providence. I'm testifying in favor of Bill 5445. So I also provided written testimony, but I did want to just describe it. It's a photo of a sculpture by Isaac Cordell entitled Politicians Discussing Global Warming. In it, the figures are conversing while ocean water rises to their necks. I had actually provided the same photograph in my testimony for last year's Act on Climate hearing. Now an entire year has passed, and I just want to urge you to not let any more time pass. We can't keep putting it off. We need to start tackling climate change like we're tackling the pandemic with urgency. So please get this passed, and thanks for letting me testify again tonight.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, you have a safe weekend. Bye-bye.
Okay, you too. Thank you.
Next witness? Who's it? Sue Kelly.
Hello?
You there?
Yes, I am, Chairman Bennett, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Oh, my pleasure. Go right ahead and try to keep it 2 minutes or less. Thank you.
You bet. You bet. I am calling in support of House Bill 5445. That we must act as quickly as possible was underlined by the United Nations Climate Agency report today, saying that all the countries together have only committed to a 1% reduction, and that within 10 years we have to meet the 45% reduction in air quality, and that we can only avert the worst of the climate disasters by making these changes. This bill will require Rhode Island to take action that might make a difference, that will make a difference, and will contribute to meaningful reduction in greenhouse gases. Personally, I've watched Lloyd's Beach at Takana Point, Rhode Island, shrink dramatically. In my 20s, I could walk and climb rocks that were part of the point. Most of the time now, they are underwater, a good way apart from the beach. Low tide provides a smaller spit of beach every year. Even as the beach becomes more and more popular, it will be mostly gone by the time within my daughter's lifetime. And I just hope that for the sake of our collective futures, that all of you support this bill, resist pressure from corporations that are going to tell you that it's not possible, and please do all you can to make the responsible decision to work towards saving Rhode Island and saving our planet. Thank you.
Thank you. Sue, any questions for Ms. Kelly? Thank you very much. You have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Next witness. Jonathan. Representative Bennett, can you hear me?
Hi, Representative. Yes, John Berard from Clean Water Action.
Okay, Jonathan, try to keep it 2 minutes or under.
I'll try for under. So again, my name is John Berard. I'm the Rhode Island State Director for Clean Water Action. And again, I speak on behalf of our nearly 20,000 members here in Rhode Island. We support H5445 and urge its swift passage. And like the Conservation Law Foundation, it is our top priority this legislative session. Real quick, those of you who are familiar with our organization know that our field canvass goes out every single day, rain, sun, or snow, to speak directly with Rhode Islanders about the issues most important to them. For the past year, they've been calling our members on the phone for reasons that we all can, I think, understand. But regardless, for the last several years, when we have spoken with our members at the door, we hear that they are most concerned with two things. First, the effects that climate change will have on them and their families, and plastic pollution, two issues that are very much linked. When we speak to people in Narragansett, Newport, and Middletown, they tell us about how worried they are about sea level rise and about contamination of their drinking water supplies. When we speak to people in Cranston and Providence, they worry about rising temperatures will impact the health of their family members that are elderly or have asthma, or that their house could be lost when we experience another storm like we did during the devastating floods of 2010. As many have said, we're already seeing evidence of the climate crisis and what happens when we fail to plan. Scientists have tied what unfolded in Texas a couple weeks ago directly to the climate crisis. We know the worst is yet to come, and the single most important step we can take is to pass this bill and set in motion the sequence of policies and programs necessary to protect our resources, our economy, and most importantly, our people from the very worst effects of the climate crisis. So I want to thank Rep. Carson for her sponsorship and for her long record of leadership on a variety of environmental and economic issues, and also to Leader Blazewski for his co-sponsorship in the past and for his previous leadership on these issues. I thank the committee for your time, and I urge swift passage, and happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any questions for Jonathan? Seeing none, thank you, Jonathan. Have a great weekend.
Same to you all. Thank you.
Next witness. Hello. Kenneth, can you hear me?
I can.
How you doing, Kenneth?
Good, Chairman Bennett.
Try to be brief and on point.
I know the drill.
Yeah, I know. I bet you do.
I'm going to be very brief. My name is Kenneth Spolarsky. I'm testifying as a private citizen, as a business owner of Spolarsky Architecture and Planning and Research and business in Rhode Island since 1976, and as chair of the U.S. Green Building Council of Rhode Island. I'm fully in support of the bill for a number of reasons. And my testimony is not going to go to the glory and plaudits of the bill, which are many, as others have done, but rather just I would like to add, have the request of the sponsors and the committee consider one simple addition. Purposes of the Executive Climate Change Coordinating Council is to assess, integrate, coordinate climate change efforts throughout state agencies. And then it goes on, and this is the recommendation that I hope you would support. In 42-6.2.3, support for the council. To support the council's work, state agencies shall, and I'd like to add item 14, comply with the requirements of the Rhode Island General Laws, Chapter 3724, the Green Buildings Act. What that would do, it would help complete the circle of responsibility and compliance of state agencies, and certainly the stewardship for climate change. And in just closing, I'd like to wish Representative Carson a very happy birthday.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Spolarsky? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Spolarsky. You have a great weekend. Our next witness. Kalyana Marek?
Hello.
Hi. Is this Kalyana?
Yes, this is.
Hi, Kalyana.
Hi.
The floor is yours. Try to be brief and under 2 minutes.
I will be. Well, thank you, members of the committee, for being here today and for introducing this bill. My name is Kalyana Marek, and I'm a 15-year-old high school student from Cranston. I would like to preface by saying I'm obviously no scientist or expert, but I believe I provide an important perspective. I'm testifying today because growing up is scary enough when it's just a matter of graduating high school, going to college, and getting a job. But it's even scarier when threats of a world-altering climate crisis are following you around every day from such a young age. Now, as kids, we all had goals we hoped to achieve. One 5-year-old I know has repeatedly told me how she wants to be a firefighter, artist, and horseback rider all at once when she's older. And I certainly have my goals, although they have gotten more realistic as I've grown up. But they've gotten more realistic for one major reason, and that's climate change. Rather than hoping to be an actor or a chef, I plan on using my career to fight the climate crisis. And I'm doing so to prevent the next generation of ambitious 5-year-olds from having to do the same. Today, you can choose to give the younger generations a head start on saving our planet. By passing this crucial piece of legislation, you will open the door to a cleaner future. So please, if not for yourself, pass this bill for the younger generations waiting to do great things. Act now while we still have time. Thank you.
Thank you, Kalyana. And you said you're 15 years old?
Yes.
You sound more mature than that. Tell your teachers that we say you should get an A for community involvement. Are there any questions for Kalyana, please? No. Very good job, Kalyana. You should be very proud.
Amazing. Thank you. Have a nice day.
You also. Okay, our next witness is going to be, I believe, Leanne. Good evening, Leanne. How are you tonight?
I'm well, thank you.
Good. This is Leanne Byrne from the Office of the General Treasurer. Leanne, you have the floor. Please try to keep it under 2 minutes as we've asked everybody else.
Sure will. Thank you. Thank you, Rep, and thank you, members of the committee. Again, my name is Leanne Byrne. I'm Deputy Chief of Staff for General Treasurer Magaziner. The Treasurer sends his apologies that he couldn't join you today, but you should have a letter from him in your materials, and I'm proud to be here on his behalf to support the 2021 Act on Climate. I want to start by thanking Representative Carson for sponsoring this bill today, and I wish her a very happy birthday. This legislation sets a goal of transitioning Rhode Island's economy to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. In doing so, Rhode Island can create good jobs, become more resilient to climate change, solidify our leadership in clean energy, improve our industrial competitiveness, and positively benefit the health of all Rhode Islanders. The Treasurer's focus is on promoting economic growth and job creation. Rhode Island has a major opportunity to put thousands of people to work by transitioning to a green economy. Our team is proud of the work that we've done with the green infrastructure finance programs at the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank, which have invested over $140 million in alternative energy and energy efficiency projects across the state, supporting more than 2,000 jobs while helping municipalities, taxpayers, small businesses, and nonprofits save money on their energy bills and reduce reliance on fossil fuels. We can and must build on this progress by setting ambitious and actionable goals like those in the Act on Climate bill. To ensure a just transition, it is vital that these jobs that are created pay wages and benefits consistent with or that exceed area wage and labor standards. We must invest in workforce development that recruits, trains, and retains members of environmental justice communities. This bill does that, so we urge the support of this committee, and I thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Byrne. Any questions for Ms. Burns? Seeing none, you have a great weekend, Leanne. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Okay, our next witness, Mr. Crowley. Good evening, Mr. Crowley.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Excellent, thank you.
This is Patrick Crowley from the AFL-CIO. Patrick, same thing that we have been asking everybody else, please keep it as succinct as possible, under 2 minutes.
Yes, sir. I'm ready to go.
Okay, go ahead.
My name is Patrick Crowley, and I am the Secretary-Treasurer of the Rhode Island AFL-CIO, representing 80,000 working men and women across the state of Rhode Island. And I am here to enthusiastically support the Act on Climate on their behalf. I'd like to call the committee's attention to the language of the bill on the top of page 3, specifically lines 5 through 10. I won't read it for you because you can read it yourselves, but we believe that the language contained in this section is incredibly important for this bill because it recognizes the need for a just transition for working people and for frontline communities across Rhode Island. We believe this language is the best of what Rhode Island can do. Lead the way, and not just in ensuring a better climate, but doing so in a way that no one is left behind. Now, I'd like to note that Earth Day is April 22nd this year. So on behalf of the labor movement, we are respectfully asking that the House move as expeditiously as possible so that we can get this bill passed and signed by the governor on or before that day, so we can have just one more reason to celebrate Rhode Island's leadership on this critical issue. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crowley. Is there any questions for Mr. Crowley? Seeing none, Mr. Crowley, you have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you hopefully soon.
Same to you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, our next witness, it should be Peter Trafton. Mr. Trafton, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to ask you to keep it as we have for everybody, under 2 minutes, and we'll give you the floor right now.
Thanks. Hello?
Yes, go ahead, proceed.
Yes. Rep. Phillips,
yes.
Chair Bennett and committee members, I'm Dr. Peter Trafton from Providence. I want to thank you all very much for your work on H5445 and for my opportunity to testify in its support. A year ago, I spoke before this committee in favor of Act on Climate in 2020. I told you about our newborn grandson and our family's concerns that because of climate change, the environment and opportunities of Rhode Island would become far less favorable as he and his 4-year-old big brother grow into adulthood. Within a few days of that crowded meeting, the COVID pandemic shut down the General Assembly's work on this and many issues, including, of course, efforts to save our environment and people from climate crisis. We're a year further along and running out of time. Science tells us that the effects of global warming will soon be baked in. We must start now with effective action to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions. Representative Carson's bill will do this. It'll help us join the 4 other New England states that have similar laws. It will help keep the $3 billion we send out of Rhode Island every year to buy fossil fuels. It will stimulate jobs, good-paying jobs, and promote a just transition for all Rhode Islanders into a carbon-free future. This bill provides a necessary foundation for our commitment to fight climate change. It must be supplemented by other measures to ensure effectiveness and necessary support for adequate employment and for racial environmental justice. Thank you very much for listening and for acting promptly on climate. Good day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Trafton. Are there any questions for this witness? Seeing none, you have a wonderful weekend, Mr. Trafton.
Thank you. The same to all of you.
Next witness, I believe, is going to be Christian Roseland. Mr. Roseland, are you there?
I am.
Yes, could you lower your computer or your radio,
sorry
please?
about that.
No, that's fine. We're asking people to keep it under 2 minutes, so if you want to proceed, please do.
Thank you so much. Thank you, representatives, committee members, and Chair Bennett for the opportunity to submit testimony. My name is Christian Roseland, and I'm a writer and energy expert. I live in Providence, and I've written about renewable energy for more than a decade as a journalist. Currently, I serve as editorial director for RMI, the foremost think tank working on the energy transition in the United States. But I'm not speaking today on behalf of RMI. I'm also the father of a 10-year-old boy, and climate change is a serious danger to him and to all of our children and future generations. I want to be clear that Rhode Island is not an exception. Our state is the fastest warming in the lower 48. We are already at risk of more severe hurricanes. As the century progresses, we can expect rising seas to flood and wash away coastal properties at a massive scale. we can expect food supply interruption, political instability, mass migration, and more to come to our nation and our state. But the more we act today, the more we can support and inspire action elsewhere, and the more we can mitigate these dangers. But I want to point out that this is not just something that we need to do, it's also a chance for something better. The actions that we need to take to combat this most serious of threats present a tremendous economic opportunity for our state. The technologies that we will deploy to combat climate change are consistently more efficient, often cheaper over the lifetime of use, and simply better than the dirty, inefficient technologies based on the combustion of fossil fuels. And this is true whether we're talking about heat pumps, induction stoves, electric vehicles, or renewable energy. And by deploying renewable energy and fixing our building stock, this will result in tremendous job creation. By investing in offshore wind farms, solar installations, and more efficient housing, we will keep more dollars in the local economy instead of sending them over to the Marcellus Shale in Pennsylvania and West Virginia. But to combat climate change, we need a plan and we need clear targets. And that is why I support H5445. This bill would set targets for decarbonizing our state's entire economy in line with the recommendations set by the world's foremost authority on climate change, the IPCC, for staying below 1.5 C of warming. This bill is ambitious enough to do the job, and it has enforcement mechanisms. Both of these are critical. The IPCC has warned us that we have 10 years left to stave off the worst effects of climate change. Tomorrow may be too late to act. I urge you to pass this bill for our children, for the world, and for our state. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roseland. Any questions for Mr. Roseland? Seeing none, have a good weekend. When we talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Next witness is, I believe, Ms. Andebois. Good evening, Ms. Andebois.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Very good. We're asking people to keep it under 2 minutes and to be as succinct as possible. This is Sue Andebois from the Nature Conservancy. Please proceed.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and thank you to the chair and vice chair and members of the committee. I also want to thank Representative Carson for your leadership in bringing this forward. So again, I'm Sue Andebois. I am with the Nature Conservancy. For those of you who might not know us, we're a global nonprofit with offices in all 50 states and almost 80 countries around the world. And the Act on Climate bill here in Rhode Island is our top legislative priority in Rhode Island. I've already submitted testimony. I will not reiterate what's in there. I'll just share 2 additional quick things. One is I want to reiterate what Amy Moses said at the beginning. The Act on Climate bill is the foundational policy for how we address climate change in Rhode Island. We really need a strong foundation to build the rest of our efforts to address climate change, and that is something we're currently lacking. And respectfully, I really urge this committee to pass this really important legislation as quickly as possible so that we can really get to the hard work of creating and implementing that action plan that Representative Carson mentioned earlier. I really like Pat Crowley's idea to pass it by Earth Day, so that I'm just going to reiterate that as well. And I'm also really glad that Representative Carson mentioned how other states and the federal government right now are addressing this issue. Our current non-binding, non-science-based goals are less than what both the federal government under the Biden administration has set as targets, as well as we are behind most of the rest of the region in terms of not having binding targets in this way. I was actually just talking with some of my colleagues across New England earlier today, and they were joking with me, "Are you guys going to pass it yet? You guys are such a laggard right now. Gosh, like Rhode Island, this is embarrassing for you guys." And so I think Rhode Island loves to see ourselves as a leader. Right now we're being a laggard. And so I would really just urge urgent passage of this legislation, and the Nature Conservancy is here to help however we can in both the passage and in creating that really solid action plan and then, implementing it. So thank you so much for this opportunity to testify. Really grateful that you're hearing this and excited to see it pass as soon as we can. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, and right almost at 2 minutes even. Well, very well timed. We like that. Any questions for Ms. Andebois? Seeing none, take care of yourself. Have a good weekend. We appreciate your testimony.
Thank you so much. Have a really great evening.
Okay, our next witness. Okay, so we'll be moving down to Priscilla de la Cruz from the Green Energy Consumer Alliance. Good evening, Ms. de la Cruz.
Good evening.
We are asking people to keep it under 2 minutes, and we're going to give you the floor starting right now.
Okay, happy to. I'll be brief and we'll highlight a few things in my verbal testimony. Chairman and fellow committee members, thank you for the opportunity to speak today in support of this critical and necessary bill. My name is Priscilla de la Cruz. I am the president of the Environment Council of Rhode Island, also known as ECRI. I am also the Rhode Island director at Green Energy Consumers Alliance. My testimony today is on behalf of ECRI. I want to first start by thanking Representative Carson for her leadership on the 2021 Act on Climate, as well as co-sponsors. This year, to also highlight, ECRI is celebrating 50 years of developing and advocating for policies that protect and enhance the environment. We're comprised of 70 organizations and individuals representing over 50,000 Rhode Islanders. I want to highlight that right around this time last year, ECRI launched its Climate Crisis Campaign, and that was with the support of 29 organizations and businesses across different sectors who endorsed one legislative priority, the Act on Climate. And shortly after that, the campaign contributed to a successful hearing in front of this committee, with great turnout from Rhode Islanders mobilized around climate action. And today, we're seeing the same during a pandemic and in this virtual setting. We must take climate action. The climate crisis is here, along with the existing racial and economic inequities and environmental injustice that has been exacerbated by the pandemic, and especially in frontline communities. And that means Black, Indigenous, and people of color and low-income communities. How we've heard tonight how disproportionately these communities are overburdened by the impact of climate change and pollution. So today, as a concerned advocate, a concerned Rhode Islander, and a concerned Latina who grew up in a low-income household experiencing and witnessing the impacts of climate and economic injustice, I urge all committee members to support climate action. And ECRI urges you to vote this bill out of committee for a vote on the House floor. And lastly, just quickly, because I work for Green Energy Consumers Alliance, who offers an electric vehicle discount program called Drive Green that helps consumers go electric, I just want to mention that our research shows, and the experience of our consumers who are taking advantage of our program is showing us that EV batteries can last as long as the car, even outlast the life expectancy of gas-powered cars, and tend to have battery warranties for 8 years or 100,000 miles. So in short, I also encourage you to look at the wealth of information that we have on our website, greenenergyconsumers.org, and we actually have an upcoming webinar called A Deep Dive into Electric Vehicle Batteries, and that's this Wednesday, I believe at 1 p.m. In conclusion, we need a solid foundation and comprehensive plan to address the climate crisis, a plan that is economy-wide and enforceable and sets us on a much-needed path to a just transition, to a transition that is green and really builds a sustainable economy. So let's pass the 2021 Act on Climate this session, and we look forward to working with you and your colleagues. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Representative McLaughlin. Microphone.
Chairman, Vice Chair, just a brief moment. I only take a moment. It's not germane to the subject matter. We're talking about, in reference to Rep. Carson, happy birthday. Okay?
Yes, happy birthday.
So we can pass Rep. Carson's bill for her birthday.
Oh, that's how easy it is. I'm going to push all my bills to my birthday.
Once again, thank you. Happy birthday.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. de la Cruz.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Okay, our next witness is Jeff Migno. Good evening, Jeff. If you could lower your volume on the computer or your radio, whichever, your TV. Okay, we're trying to get people to stay under 2 minutes, so we'll give you the floor right now.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Hi. My name is Jeff Mignault, born and bred Rhode Island resident, now living in Smithfield. Just want to say I'm a strong supporter of this bill for all the reasons that have already been so clearly articulated today. But I want to mention briefly 2 experiences that inform my support for the bill and for strong climate action in general. Both of these experiences happened over 40 years ago. First was my introduction to the issue of climate change. I was majoring in geology and had a professor, John Embry, who was very worried about this very issue way back then. He was a paleoclimatologist and knew that there were times in the past that the Earth was uninhabitable and that we were changing the atmosphere faster than it had ever changed before. So 40 years later, that concern has only been reinforced by new science. And this stark reality suggests that we should do whatever is necessary to prevent this catastrophic outcome, no matter the sacrifice. But if we know anything about human behavior, we also know that we're not good at short-term sacrifice for long-term gain. But here, we're in luck that it's not going to take much sacrifice. You've already heard about clear, short, and medium-term benefits for eliminating CO2 emissions. That brings me to my second experience. We just passed the 43rd anniversary of the blizzard of '78. I was living in Providence on Bowen Street then, and the whole city shut down for days. There were no cars, most factories shut down. And what was great about that is how fresh the air became. It smelled like Vermont, and it was so quiet. It is benefits like this that we can look forward to. And it's not just the freshness of the air. A new Harvard study estimated that pollution from fossil fuels accounted for 350,000 deaths each year in the U.S. And this is a social justice issue because most of these deaths were concentrated in poorer communities of color. Achieving the goals of this bill would eliminate those deaths and achieve an incredible public health gain. So in closing, I encourage you to pass the strongest version of this bill possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mignault. Any questions for this witness? Hearing none, the only thing I can say is I remember the blizzard of '78 very well.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
You're welcome. Have a great evening.
You too.
Next witness is Greg Garrett, and I'm going to turn it back over to Chairman Bennett.
Greg, you there?
I am here.
I don't even have my microphone on. Keep it brief in 2 minutes or less.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
This is Greg Garrett. I'm from Providence. I want to tell a very quick story. Think about 100 years ago. The automobile was becoming the big thing in America. The oil industry was growing. It had only had its first gusher 20 years before. And all the people in the industries around horses, the cart makers, the breeders, the food growers, the buggy whip makers, they were all like, we can't let the horse and buggy go out of the business. We got to stop the cars. And yet, by 1950, when I was growing up, you never saw a horse in town anymore. There weren't any. So why are we thinking that we can't do this in 30 years? Why are we thinking that we did this 100 years ago? In 30 years, horses were totally replaced by cars. Oil replaced coal and heating houses. We can do this easily. And when we think about the innovations in batteries, in cars, and when somebody tells me that there's not going to be pumps, tell me that Cumberland Farms hasn't already got plans to put electric plugs at all of their gas stations? I mean, it's time for us to get real and for us to actually take action and to deal with the most important crisis of our time. We have to stop this climate change, and we can innovate it, and we can do this easily. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Greg? Seeing none, thank you, Greg. You have a safe and healthy weekend.
Thank you. Take care.
Next witness should be Evan Ridley.
Evan and Diane are available. The next one is Jen.
Okay, so we go into Diane Lynch?
No,
What?
she's not available either. So
Neither one of them are.
Yeah, neither one.
Okay, then we get to go to Jed Thorpe. Jed, you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Jed. This is Representative
okay.
Dave Bennett.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief. As you know, Narragansett Bay has seen a variety of threats and challenges over the years,
I gotta
from
go back.
poorly
You missed-
treated
you
sewage
missed
to
somebody.
fish kills to oil spills and hurricanes.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't told that.
But I don't think it's a stretch to say that climate change is the greatest threat to Narragansett Bay. Sea levels are already rising and will rise more in the coming years, and habitats being lost, and the bay's waters are warming. Rhode Island, as Representative Carson pointed out in her testimony, is on the front lines of climate change, and we are experiencing the impacts faster than perhaps any other state in the country. If any state is going to lead in the fight against climate change, it should be the ocean state. In this country and in our state, when we identify a source of pollution that's harmful to humans or the environment, we research the issue and we set mandatory and legally enforceable standards based on science. That's what we did for lead in the 1970s. That's what we did for sulfur dioxide in the 1980s. And mandatory enforceable standards is what we should put in place for carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases. The standards that are set forth in this bill are in line with what the science tells us we must do if we have any hope of preventing the most catastrophic impacts from climate change. And as Representative Carson pointed out, I know there are those who will say that Rhode Island is a small state and it doesn't matter what we do. Well, that's not leadership, that's a cop-out. Every state in the country and every country in the world could say the same thing. The nature of the climate change problem is such that there is no silver bullet solution. No one state or country has the ability to solve it on their own. We must all do our part. And as the state most affected by climate change, if we're going to point the finger at other states, we must first show leadership by doing all that we can to be part of this solution. So on behalf of our members, I urge you to vote yes and act on climate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Jed. Any questions for Jed? Thank you, Jed. You have a good, safe weekend.
Yes, you as well. Bye now.
Thank you. Our next witness should be Diane Hill.
Yes, it is.
Diane, you there? Nope. Give her a minute.
She is now.
How you doing, Diane?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing well. This is Rep. Dave Bennett. The floor's yours. Try to keep it brief and 2 minutes or under.
I will. Thank you, Chairman Bennett and members of the committee. My name is Diane Hill. I'm a resident of North Kingstown. I'm here today to testify in favor of House Bill 5445, Act on Climate. As others have said, there's widespread agreement among scientists that climate change has already been set in motion in terms of irreversible sea level rise and extreme weather events. Unfortunately, the issue now is no longer reversing the effects of climate change. The issue now is mitigating the most catastrophic effects of global warming in the future. I have 2 grandchildren who are growing up in Rhode Island, a 7-year-old granddaughter and a 4-year-old grandson. If we don't take action now to decrease and eliminate human-made greenhouse gas emissions, my grandchildren will be forced to try to live with a global climate disaster that will be irreparable. The Act on Climate bill will get Rhode Island on track to do its part in addressing this crisis. It will also grow the green energy economy in our state and create good-paying green energy jobs. I feel we have a moral imperative to take action now, and House Bill 5445 addresses our responsibility. I want to be able to look my grandchildren in the eye and tell them that we acted on our responsibility to them and future generations by enacting this bill into law. Thank you for listening.
You have a safe weekend. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Diane. Be healthy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Our next witness should be Victoria Layton. We're going to go to Hank Webster, okay? Hank, you there? Hello?
I am here, Chair Bennett. Yes.
Hey, how you doing, Hank?
I'm well.
Try to stay on point in 2 minutes or less.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Bennett, and happy birthday, Rep. Carson. Rep. Carson noted the importance of science, and while we often talk about carbon in terms of climate change, there are also other pollutants that come out when you burn fossil fuels. Nitrogen dioxide, sulfur oxides, and particulate matter, just to name a few. When we reduce fossil fuel combustion, we also reduce the local cases of asthma, cardiovascular disease, and as Mr. Mignot just mentioned a little while ago, premature death. I also want to rebut some of the misleading or false claims from previous testimony. First, I want to clear up that decarbonizing the heating sector does not require investments of $50,000, as the Northern Rhode Island Chamber lobbyists would have you think. That figure was for a deep energy retrofit of a house, which would include replacing all the windows and insulating the floors and exterior walls. Doing something like that could get you to a point where you barely require any heat or air conditioning at all, but it's not necessary to decarbonize your heat, and it's not common at all. What is more common for Rhode Islanders are low-cost energy efficiency improvements. Simple things like weather sealing and attic insulation that there's about $575. I want to repeat that number, $575, not $50,000. And it saves you about 10 to 15% on your heating energy needs, no matter what fuel you use. You can decarbonize the rest of the energy you use for heating in a number of ways, including renewable fuels like those that are produced by Newport Biodiesel, by using carbon offsets, or by switching your heating equipment to a highly efficient heat pump, which does provide heating, air conditioning, and dehumidification in one simple machine. A system for an average size home would probably cost between $10,000 to $15,000 depending on your individual circumstances, but those costs can be offset with incentives by avoiding the cost of replacing an old furnace, boiler, and air conditioning system, and by lower fuel costs. And I just want to use the last few minutes to say, or a few seconds to say that on electric vehicles, I respectfully don't know where some of the claims came from. I have an electric vehicle with a battery that is 6 years old, and there's been absolutely no drop-off. And federal regulations actually mandate that the battery packs have an 8-year or 100,000-mile warranty. And I will take the cost of a battery any day over engine, transmission, exhaust, brake replacements all the time, and lower fueling costs, and no maintenance intervals, really. And that's why companies that operate fleets like Amazon, FedEx, UPS, Walmart, J.B. Hunt, and so many others are moving their fleets to electric vehicles. So in closing, I will just say Rep. Carson and others have noted that the world's economy and industries are making the changes. It's not being done in secret. They're telling you during the Super Bowl, the largest advertising platform in the world. So I wish that the few interests that lined up against this bill adopted a stance of preparation and innovation instead of trepidation. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee has.
Thank you. Any questions for Hank? Seeing none, thank you, Hank. Have a great, safe weekend.
You too. Thank you.
Hi, Victoria, you there?
Yes, hi.
Hi, Victoria. This is Rep. Bennett. If you can keep your comments and testimony brief and try to keep it 2 minutes or under. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Go ahead, proceed.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Hi there. My name is Victoria Layton. I'm a physician, emergency medicine physician, and I'm actually calling you from the Miriam Hospital today, so I apologize for any background noise. But I'm calling you to really very strongly urge you to pass the Act on Climate bill today. I know that we as a society, and obviously in Rhode Island, have all been incredibly focused on COVID over the past year. But even from my perspective in the emergency department, the threat from climate change is so much greater and so much all-encompassing, and something that we need to act on right now. Like COVID, climate change affects those who are most at risk, people of color, those who are economically disadvantaged, those at extremes of age, I've personally taken care of Rhode Island's elderly and mentally ill who can't regulate their temperature during heat waves. Every year, I see more and more Lyme disease, ehrlichiosis, babesiosis, and other tick-borne diseases. The World Health Organization blames pollution for a very large number of heart attacks, strokes, and other cardiovascular disease. And I myself have pronounced multiple children of color dead due to asthma. And this is a societal failure. The pollution that triggers this disease is modifiable. We can do something about this. So it's up to us, it's up to you now to act to reduce the risk to these populations as well as to Rhode Island and the world in general. There is something that we can do. And the Act on Climate is a really strong step in the right direction to bring us closer to where we need to be. And so I very, very strongly urge you to pass this bill today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Layton, and I thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Any questions for the doctor? I see none. Doctor, you have a safe, great weekend, please.
Thank you so much. Take good care. Stay safe. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Hello. Hello, Joel.
Yes.
Rep Bennett from the Environment and Natural Resources Committee. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Bennett and members of the committee. My name is Joel Gates. I am a resident of Gloucester, Rhode Island, and I'm here to testify in support of H5445, the 2021 Act on Climate. There have been plenty of experts today and all along stating that our weather has become increasingly volatile due to climate change. As a kid, I remember experiencing hurricanes and other extreme storms, but they were few and far between. And more recently, heavy rain and wind events have become more frequent and severe. Personally, I don't deal with these storms very well. My level of anxiety increases as I wonder what's in store for us this time around. You know, will we lose power? How long will the outage last? How much food will spoil in the fridge? And don't forget to fill the bathtub with water. Usually the storms have not been nearly as devastating as my imagination. Still, every time the wind starts to howl, my blood pressure goes up. And when the storm passes and things aren't so bad, I know there are other folks who are much worse off than I. I think of Houston suffering through multiple hurricanes and major rain events leading to widespread flooding, and most recently the crippling cold snap. And I think of Bangladesh that is being claimed by a rising ocean. I think of the western United States ravaged by fire. And I think of Rhode Island's frontline environmental justice communities like South Providence, whose residents are breathing diesel exhaust from 95 and toxic Allens Avenue. These are the vulnerable folks we need to be thinking about. It is time for Rhode Island to be bold in its transition away from fossil fuels. It is time for Rhode Island to show New England and the rest of the country that cutting our greenhouse gas emissions will grow our economy and improve our shared environment. Please pass the Act on Climate bill and support it in the full House so that we can bring meaningful climate action to Rhode Island. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joel. Any questions? Thank you very much, Joel. You have a good weekend.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Bye-bye. Hello, Brian.
Chairman Bennett.
How you doing?
I am well this evening. How are you?
I'm doing well. If you can keep it 2 minutes or under, it'll be much appreciated.
Okay, very well. Thank you, Chairman Bennett, Vice Chair Phillips, Second Vice Chair O'Brien, and members of the committee. My name is Brian Moran. I'm Director of Government Affairs for the New England Convenience Store and Energy Marketers Association. We represent nearly 500 convenience stores and gasoline retailers and the businesses which supply them in Rhode Island and employ over 7,200 people. We are currently opposed to HB 5445, and I want to briefly touch on 4 of our concerns. As the regulated community for any transportation-related greenhouse gas emission program, we have unique concerns that are often not visible to the public or contemplated by regulators as they develop plans, strategies, and programs. We could all agree that the mandatory emission targets as proposed, which we don't have issue with, give that no one can really foresee what is going to happen in the next decade, or 2 decades, or 3 decades. Our concern is that given that will be the foundation for state government climate action, it's imperative that this ideology for action become integrated with and leverage the knowledge of those participants in the economic marketplace to achieve meaningful results, successful programs, and least cost policies. We urge the committee to consider creating or expanding the existing climate-related boards and committees to capture this essential input and collaboration. A failure to create this vision and shared vision is essential so that we can avoid public policy failures and unnecessary delays. And what I think is critical for this policy is widespread public acceptance. The second concern we have with the bill is that, as an example to demonstrate the level of funding and financing that will be necessary for this bill, in Massachusetts this month, legislators filed LD 1972. It encompasses both revenue generation and bonding, and it will basically put together $10 billion to jumpstart these efforts to enforce their mandatory 2030 45% greenhouse gas reduction target.
Brian, try to finish up.
You bet. We urge the committee to consider and identify funding approaches similar to this so that people know what the price tag of these programs are going to be. 2 other last points real quick is that the U.S. Energy Information Administration provides typically all the data on emissions and greenhouse gas emissions that are produced in each of the states. There's typically a lag of almost 2 years for that data to then become publicly known. This is really important because our last concern revolves around the specifics provision of the citizen suits. And we believe it lacks necessity. I believe that existing remedies are already in place for aggrieved parties to take action against the state. And we fear that these suits will distract and potentially derail the normal iterative process and fine-tuning that happens as you implement a new state policy or program. And to expect perfection out of the gate is going to be unrealistic.
In conclusion, Brian.
In conclusion, I appreciate the fine work that has been done on this bill. We think that more details need to be worked out, and particularly around business involvement and identifying the costs. Thank you very much, and be happy to answer any questions of the committee.
Thank you, Brian. Any question for Brian? Yes, Vice Chairman Phillips.
Thank you, Chairman. Brian, I have a couple of questions. I have one major one, and then I'm going to follow up with the second one afterwards. You said you have 500-plus convenience stores, correct?
Correct.
How many of those convenience stores have fuel pumps or gas pumps available out of the 500-plus?
Probably over 400.
So a majority of them?
Correct.
Okay, and the second question is, do they have the room to replace those pumps with the electric power banks to charge the vehicles if need be?
How I view the situation is that, first let me say that our members sell, transportation fuels not because we're in love with them, it's because that's what people want. And that's how people get around and live their lives and move about. As mobility shifts towards electrification or other alternative fuels, we're going to be there for them, and we're going to evolve with them. And in terms of being able to address that, it's more of a transition that I foresee occurring as opposed to a flick of a switch, where we're going to switch out the gas pumps and put in electric chargers. And a lot of our stations are looking to put in chargers, and some have. But one of the barriers that remains for switching to electrification and providing that service is the business model. That there really isn't a business model yet to demonstrate private investment in that technology in terms of charging at a gas station.
Okay, I just think that I know from past experience with dealing with convenience stores and gas stations and that they know that these things are going to be evolving sooner or later, and that they were going to start investing money into putting a lot of these charging stations into, and then start reducing a few of the gas pumps so that they can wean their way away as the need decreases for the gasoline and the increase of the need for the electric charging point. Thank you, Brian.
You bet. Thank you, sir. Thank you for the question.
Questions? Any other questions? Thank you very much, Brian. You have a safe and
Thank you,
good
Chairman
weekend.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
What next witness should be Will Nakshin. Hi, Will.
Yes.
Hi, Rep. Bennett. Try to keep your testimony brief and 2 minutes and under. Thank you.
Thank you, committee members, for taking my testimony. My name is Will Nakshin. I am a homeowner in Cumberland, and Representative Alex Marzlikowski is my rep. And I have been concerned about climate change for over 20 years, but I personally have never done anything about that. But I've become an activist at this point, and I am a member of Climate Action Rhode Island, and currently I'm standing out on Francis Street in a cold February night with some volunteers holding a sign that says "Act on Climate," facing towards the west side of the building where you guys are having your meeting, because I feel so strongly about this bill and how important it is to create clean energy jobs in Rhode Island, to keep more energy producing dollars in our state, and to secure a future for my children. And I just want to thank you for taking my testimony, and I hope you'll come to the window and look out on our sign.
We sure will. Thank you very much. And you know, the best part about this bill is shows people are really concerned and actually want to do something about it. We appreciate your testimony. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. And we will look out and see your sign. So wave.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Hello, Chapman Beekman.
Yes.
How you doing? This is Rep. Dave Bennett. Go ahead and testify. Try to keep it brief, on point, in 2 minutes or under.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
My name's Chapman. I'm in North Providence, Rhode Island, and I'd like to speak in support of Bill 5445, Act on Climate 2021. I urge you to support this bill. I don't think that it's overly ambitious. In fact, I think it's probably closer to the bare minimum than anything that could be considered overly ambitious. As you've already heard, multiple states have similar bills on the books, some for many years now. I was lucky enough to grow up in Rhode Island and spend a lot of time in my childhood along the shoreline. I am 33 years old now, and you don't need to be an expert to see that our shoreline has already been devastated by sea level rise and coastal erosion. It's true that Rhode Island is a small state, and we can't solve this problem on our own. And even if we were to meet these goals tomorrow, I don't think that we would solve climate change. However, Rhode Island is practically surrounded by the ocean. In fact, I think we have the highest shoreline to landmass ratio out of any state in the United States. We have Democratic leadership in the state, in the State House, Senate, and the governor. And as you've heard, climate change is also the top issue in the public, second only to COVID-19. So the question is, if we don't do everything to save ourselves now, who will? So I think it's time that we show some leadership on this issue, and I think the first step in that direction is to get this bill signed into law. So I urge you to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Chapman. I couldn't agree with you more. Any questions for Chapman? Seeing none, thank you, Chapman. You have a great weekend. Be safe.
You too. Thanks.
Our next witness should be Crystal Nassau. Hi, Crystal.
Hello, Chairman Bennett and the committee.
Hi. The floor is yours. Try to keep it brief in under 2 minutes. Thank you.
I sure will. My name is Crystal Noiser. I'm a resident of Pawtucket, and I am here to testify in support of this bill. As Rep. Carson mentioned, Rhode Island is experiencing the highest rate of temperature rise in all of the lower 48 states. And I come from a family of firefighters, and with the extreme drought we've experienced this past year, we've had over 100 wildfires in our state. And I couldn't believe that figure when I heard it. We hear about the ones out west. They get a lot of attention, but we're challenged by this here too, and I worry about how much more difficult and dangerous their jobs might get. I think too about my nephews who are outdoor laborers, how they're exposed to the extreme heat more often simply because of what they do. My mother, she turns 80 this year and really struggles in the heat. She always has, and I worry about how she's going to cope with more and more days that break 90 degrees. Myself, I suffered from childhood asthma, which luckily improved as I got older, but that's not the case for many in my community that suffer, and I know firsthand how extreme heat exacerbates it. I also see many in my community here in Pawtucket struggle with large energy bills that come along with more cooling, especially just this past summer when we broke yet another temperature record. I'll just close by sharing that because of our warming ocean as well, some of our most cherished places here in Rhode Island, our beaches, our waterfront businesses, our historic sites, they're at risk of being altered or destroyed even by sea level rise, by storm surge, and by flooding, and I really believe the young ones coming up should be able to enjoy them as we all have. And so I ask you to support this bill and send it to the House floor for a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. Any questions for Crystal? Seeing none, thank you, Crystal. You be healthy.
You too, thanks.
Next witness should be Isabel Montini. Isabel Montini.
Hi, so my name is Isabella Montini, and I would be speaking directly or specifically to Chairman Bennett and members of the Environment and Natural Resources Committee. I represent the NK Environmental Organization, and we strongly support Bill H5445, and we urge you to support it as well. Rhode Island is in desperate need of stricter environmental legislation to avoid the disaster of climate change. We must take care of the earth we live on, which is why the NK Environmental Organization supports this call to action. Giving young people and students voices and a platform to make change is what I co-founded this organization on. It was started a few months ago, and so far we have grown in members and have spread to different towns to build branches and networks throughout Rhode Island. We have a responsibility to save our earth for future generations to come, and what better time to start than in the present? The sooner we get started, the sooner we can start the process of reducing greenhouse gas emissions to limit the drastic impact of climate change and global warming. Passing this legislation will prompt Rhode Island to set an example for other states to follow and to commence our fight against climate change. These guidelines are very achievable, and they will prompt us to make individual changes as well as legislative change to preserve our earth and climate for future generations to come. Speaking for myself and the students within my organization, we urge you to support Bill H5445 for the 2021 Act on Climate. Together we can work towards a more sustainable future by making this positive change. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabella. Any questions for Isabella? Seeing none, thank you, Isabella. You have a great weekend.
Thank you so much. I hope you have a great weekend as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
And our last witness should be Kay Salem. Kai. Kai, you there?
Hello, yes.
You're our last witness, Kai, as far as I know. So Go ahead, try to be brief.
Well, thank you for your time, and that's good incentive to be brief. My name is Kai Salem. I'm the Policy Coordinator for Green Energy Consumers Alliance. We work in Massachusetts and Rhode Island to advance energy policy that serves consumers and combats the climate crisis. The science and the Rhode Island public, as you have heard tonight, say that we need to pass this bill in order to reduce emissions to net zero by 2050. Massachusetts passed comparable legislation more than a decade ago. My written testimony covers how we Green Energy Consumers Alliance utilized the lawsuit provision back in 2014 and how the bill and that subsequent enforcement has helped Massachusetts' green economy become a national leader. Unlike concerns expressed earlier today, the enforcement provision has helped Massachusetts actually improve its policy and economy, not the other way around. I'd also like to focus on responding to a few points rather than restating my written testimony. First, there's concern around expense. A prior speaker mentioned that Massachusetts released a bill to raise revenue to fund climate action. Well, in the last month, the Republican governor of Massachusetts also released a separate plan, and this plan is regulatory, not just an introduced bill, that meets the comparable targets with a plan to go along with existing innovation in the industry and without such a hefty price tag. This transition is already happening. Right now, Rhode Island is being left behind, and we need to start getting ahead. One prior speaker mentioned that our electricity system currently runs primarily on natural gas. That's all about to change. By 2030, about 82% of the electricity in state will be coming from renewable sources, whether that's already planned offshore wind procurements or existing renewable energy in state that we are currently exporting. It is doable, and it's already this transition is already going to happen, but we need to plant a flag that tells the industry and Rhode Islanders that we're taking the climate crisis seriously. If anyone has any other questions about the energy policy that can get us there, like 100% renewable energy standard or separate initiatives, then I'm happy to answer those later. But for now, I just want to restate that the Act on Climate bill is a priority of the environmental community and has been, and this is the one bill that we need to jumpstart action in this critical area for Rhode Island.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you, Kai. Have a good night and a safe weekend.
You too.
That concludes the hearing on 5445. We tried to get a hold of Mr. Martesian, but we have his written testimony. I want to remind people that your written testimony can be found on the General Assembly homepage, bottom right-hand corner. You'll see it says Documents. Go under the documents and just hit Environment and Natural Resources, and you can read the testimony. I want to thank the committee for hanging in there, showing their strong support, and have a good night, everyone, and a safe weekend. Motion to adjourn. Second. We're adjourned.